Do you guys remember when a timeless came out like a few months ago and is like one of the best planar IEM that's ever been released out in the market today? It was truly market breaking for its time, and no one would ever even think that another product would come out that would hold the same crown or hold the same status so soon. Until this guy came out, the Shuoer S12. This is basically the timeless, but a little bit more downgraded with a big discount, $70 cheaper than a timeless. Hey friends, Tim here, welcome back to another video on GIS Audio. And today we have the Shuoer S12. Now this came to a gigantic surprise to me. I'm a big fan of the timeless, and when it came out, I was super hyped about it. It is still, to this day, one of the best planar IEM you can grab, and one of the best IEM period that you can grab under $300. Now the S12 coming in at $150, really trying to take the crown away from timeless. For me though, it really doesn't do that. It's not as good as a timeless, but it comes really close. And that $70 discount over the timeless is something that's really hard to pass off, because this, in tuning, tonal-wise, sounds near identical to the timeless. It has around 95% similarity to the timeless. I would say a little bit brighter than the timeless, so a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more intense than the timeless. But overall, it is 90 to 95% the same sound. So at $70 off, it's pretty much a no-brainer. Now where this take a little bit of hit is in technical performance. It's just not as technically sound as the timeless. The timeless is just more clean, more analytical, while this is smoother and more musical. Now, for some of you guys out there, more musical would actually be more pleasing to the ear. Something that's a little bit too detailed, too analytical, too clean can come across a little bit, I would say, jarring to some. To me, not really. But for some of you guys out there, you guys might not like something that's a little bit too speedy, too fast, too much information. You know, sometimes it distracts you from the music. I understand that. For me, that's never the case. But if that's the case for you, the S12 would actually be my recommendation to you over the timeless, because this is smoother, more musical, a little bit more organic in the timbre as well. The timeless has a little bit of that planar timbre, so a little bit kind of pinchy kind of feeling. The S12 has that as well, but a lot less than the timeless, giving the S12 again a more organic, smoother, more musical feel versus the timeless. So if you want a smoother IEM, the S12. If you want a better, more analytical, more detailed IEM, go for the timeless. Now, enough about the comparison. Let's jump right into the actual sound of these IEMs. What do they sound like? So starting with the bass on this is quite strong. It has a lot more mid bass than sub bass, so you're gonna feel a lot more slam, a lot more hits, and the power in the bass is a lot, but it's never too much. It never really leans way into bass head territory for me. I can stomach the bass that's on this. In fact, I think it's quite beautifully done. The sub bass on here though is a little bit behind the mid bass. You won't really feel as much rumbly feeling as you would the mid-bass impact, if you will. Now the mid-range on this, it has a little bit of that V-shape-ish mid-range, which means that the mid-range is a little bit concave or a little bit recessed, but in this case, not too much, not to the point where it's veiled or hidden behind any muddy bass or any bleeding or anything like that. The vocalist still comes across quite nicely, and that has to do with how good the upper mid-range is done on here. The upper mid-range energy on the S12 is really nice, and it saves the vocals from being hidden behind that strong bass that it has. The vocalist still comes across just as forward as the bass, and that's something I truly appreciate. Male vocals, female vocals, instrumentals, they still have a presence in the song despite this being a little bit more of a V-shape than a neutral IEM. On to the treble area. Now this is an area that might pose a problem for some of you guys out there who are more sensitive to treble. This is quite intense. There's a lot of treble. The one good thing about this is that it reveals a lot of little nuances, a lot of little micro details is shown with the S12. The downside is that it can be just a touch too intense for some of you guys out there. For me, I quite like it. I think it adds a lot of, again, intensity. It adds a lot of nuances into the song that I really enjoy. And I personally like a little bit of that extra bite but I do understand that some of you guys out there may not like that as much as I do. So be warned, keep that in mind. Now the Timeless, like I said again, is a little bit less bright than the S12, giving the Timeless a little bit more of an even feeling treble, if you will. So if that matters to you, the Timeless will be the better choice there. Technical performance time, we're talking detail, resolution, sound stage, and imaging, right? So when it comes to details and resolution, this thing lands just behind the Timeless. It's right in between the Starfield and the Timeless. It's just not quite the Timeless, but hey, for $150 to land right on that spot, that's really good. That's very impressive. On to soundstage and imaging. Now the soundstage on this is quite impressive. It's not massively wide, I would say, but it is a little bit outside your head, which is a little bit above average for this price bracket. So quite nice. It has more width than it does have height though, so a little less grandeur, but a little bit more left to right kind of wideness. In terms of imaging, I would say this lands just about average. It's not really pinpoint or anything like that. I would say this is the poorest part of the IEMs, that it doesn't really image as good as the Timeless. The Timeless absolutely imaged better than the S12, so that's one of the trade-off there. Now for some comparison, I already compared this thing to the Timeless, so I'm not gonna touch on that again. The next set of IEMs I'm gonna compare this one to is the Kato and the Hana 2021. Now I wrote those two together because they sound quite similar. If you want to know how they're different, I did a video on that at length. You guys can check it out, link in the description. The S12 versus the Kato and the Hana. I would say the S12 has a lot more treble than both of those IEMs. The Kato and the Hana are a little bit more tame. They're not going to really be IEMs that reveal too many micro details or little nuances in the song. The S12 is going to do a better job at that. In terms of bass cleanliness, tightness, I would say the Kato has tighter bass, more well-controlled bass than the S12. The Hana 2021's bass is a little bit more loose than the S12, so I would say the S12 lands just right in between those two bass-wise. Now when it comes to mid-range, I would say they're quite different. The Hana and the Kato both have a more neutral and flat mid-range leading up to a quite energetic upper mid-range, while the S12 has a slightly bit more recessed mid-range and a similar upper mid-range. If you want to listen to more vocalists and more instrumentals, orchestras, I still recommend the Kato and the Hana 2021 over the S12. But for any other genre of music that requires you to have more fun, you know, you listen to pop, you listen to rock, metal, R&B, hip-hop, then the S12 is gonna be the more fun option while still retaining an organic-ish kind of feel when it comes to the mid-range. Again, the mid-range is not too veiled, it's just a little bit recessed, but it's still relatively well done. Not as good as the Kato, but not too far behind. Detail-wise, I would say it's about the same as the Hana 2021, while maybe slightly bit behind the Kato, if not the same. That's just, you know, nitpicking at this point. You can say it's about the same as the Kato. Compared to the IKKO OH10, now this was requested by some viewers here. Now the IKKO OH10 is a very sub-bass monstrosity of an IEM. I love it, I love it, I really like it. The treble area as well is also very forward, very intense, has quite good detail retrieval. I would say if you can find a close IEM to compare with the S12, the IKKO OH10 is a really good candidate. Now the mid-range is where you're gonna find the most amount of difference, is that the S12 just has better mid-range. It has a little bit more forward mid-range, a little bit more organic, if you will, than the IKKO OH10. The IKKO OH10 is purely a V-shaped IEM that focuses a lot on the sub-bass, and with how strong the sub-bass and the bass both are, it makes the mid-range suffer a little bit. If you want the most fun out of a V-shaped IEM, then I still recommend the IKKO OH10. But if you want better tuned than the OH10 while still keeping a similar type of signature, the S12 would win. All in all, in summary, what do I think about the S12 and what do I recommend you guys do? I would say if you have $200, this is gotta be one of your #1 consideration out there, especially if the sound signature fits your profile. If you're looking for a fun IEM with really good bass, really well done mid-range for a V-shape, and intensity in the treble, you want micro details, you want nuances in your song, the S12 is a no-brainer. And I would give this one a value rating of just one of the best value out there you can grab for the money, right up there with the Timeless in terms of bang for buck category, if you will. So the S12, one of the biggest surprises this year so far, and one that everyone should consider.